Alright guys, I just want to make a quick video on how to do flood coolant really cheap. So to do flood coolant really cheap, of course you need a pump. This is a 60 watt 12 volt pump from eBay. They're about 16 bucks or 17 bucks or something like that. And they're 12 volts. Now the hard part is going to your local store and getting the correct type of hose. This is a 5/16 vinyl hose, and it just barely, you gotta really ram it on there for these connections to fit, but then 5/16 works fine. So that 5/16 hose connects to these fittings that are here, but it'll also go onto an air chuck. So I use an air chuck and a fitting so I can switch between flood coolant and air if I felt like it. And you can get these real cheap, but you gotta buy like 10 at once. You can't really, or 5 at once or whatever. You can't really buy a single one for a decent price. But yeah, and the cheap ones, they leak too. They don't make good seals around anything. But so yeah, you got 5/16 hose. You got your nozzles. You got your $17 12 volt 60 watt pump, diaphragm pump. So then, it runs off of 12 volts. So any old computer power supply you got laying around you can use. And if you've never messed with these computer power supplies before, there's always in the main connector, there's always a green wire towards the center. That's the on-off. That's for on-off. So you just clip that green wire and tie it to ground, or put a paper clip or whatever. But if you ground the green wire, the computer power supply will come on anytime it's plugged in. So or you can put a switch on there or whatever you want to do. So we got our power supply and our pump. Now this is a nice slick way of making this. I don't have the cover on here yet, but so the 12 volts goes into here, and I have a buck converter and a potentiometer and a switch, so I can turn it on and off separately from all the rest of my stuff, and I can control the pressure of the flood coolant. So before we get to how I did that, and this makes, you use one of these light switch boxes, and it makes a nice clean enclosure, because the buck converter and everything is stuffed behind here, because there's plenty of room behind the switch to put stuff. And it's only 12 volts going in here. It's not like line power coming in here. But I just had this stuff laying around in my junk pile, so that's why I used it. And they're pretty cheap if you were to buy it, so it's a good way to go, really. But before I get into how to do the electronics, I was messing with this stuff. This is just like plastic version of cardboard, and it's pretty thick and solid, and it's that's what it is. But I use that to make my catch tray, which has obviously it's got a hole in the middle. And but that was, I tried to put two pieces together, and I used caulking and stuff, and it just still leaked. So what I did was this right here. If you go to the dollar store, and you can get you the thickest plastic shower curtain you can find, and use a shower curtain to put under that. But this plastic stuff gives it structural rigidity, but the shower curtain keeps any leaking, and then it just goes down into a tub. And and here, let me take this shit off so I can show y'all. This is a real clever trick I came up with, because you got your metal chips and stuff going down in here. So let me see if I can find it. Oh, there it is. So you don't want your pump sucking up the metal chips. Well, I can't get it. But so basically what I did was I went to the car parts store and I got one of those fuel pump sock filters. You know, you got a fuel pump goes down into your gas tank, and it's got a little sock filter on the end of it. You can buy those for like $6, and it's pretty easy to stick on the end of that hose with air fittings. So it went right on, and so now I have a fuel pump sock filter on the end of my pickup line for my pump, and that works great for keeping the chips out from running through the pump, because it's a rubber diaphragm pump, you know. So that's the trick I did for that. And you know, shower curtain works good, and the plastic cardboard like stuff. Now back to this, the electronics. I mean, you know, not everybody knows how to mess with electronics that good. So, yeah, if they're color, yellow is always going to be 12 volts. Black's going to be ground. And so you run your yellow wires in. So you want to be able to adjust the power. So here's what I used. This is a buck converter. It adjusts the voltage. It's the LM2596. They're dirt cheap on eBay. But you've got this little tiny adjustment right here. And then even to adjust that, you got to have a special little trim pot adjusting tool, and it's always a pain to get that in there. So what I did was I just use a soldering iron, heat up these three little things, and pull that thing off. And if you take off this potentiometer, which is a 10,000 ohm, and you get you one of these type of potentiometers in a 10K, and then you just you use some 22 gauge solid core wire, and then you just wire these three prongs in the same spots where these three connections went, solder that on, and then you can use one of these, and that's how I did it. You know, that's what's in there is this and this, and that's all mounted inside of this box, and you know, I can adjust it right here, you know. So and then instead of making all the connections solid, I use the screw terminals where the connections go on this light switch to make stuff in such a way to where if I didn't need to move stuff, I could just unscrew the bolts in there and remove the wires. And you know, the wires aren't all soldered together. I utilize those screw blocks and the grounding screw block on the light switch to connect stuff, so it can be removed later without cutting wires. So I'm going to show you how it works now. So let me turn my breaker on. So I got this pointed at this wall here. Okay. So if we turn, I'm going to turn the knob all the way down, flip the switch, and then I'm just going to slowly turn this knob up, the voltage up. So there's flood coolant. Now if I turn it up more, that's just up a little bit. It sprays a bunch harder. That's about hard as it sprays. And as you can see, these cheap things leak quite a bit. But I wouldn't even need that much pressure. I mean, something about right halfway is just fine. And that way you got flood coolant, you got your simple, cheap catch basin and a little plastic tub in the bottom to catch everything. You've got your pump, you got your filter on the end of the pump, and this thing, and your adjustment here. And you got a switch. So I mean, that's how I set it up, and you know, I did everything in a nice cheap way, and that works good. I mean, it'd be nice if this thing didn't leak so damn bad, but you know, that's how I did it. And that way, you know, I've got this connection here, so I can just quick disconnect this and put the air chuck in and switch to air real quick if I wanted to. Pretty convenient. But yeah, that's all you need is one of these, and this is just adjust the voltage down. So whatever you put in, you can adjust it anywhere from 0 to whatever you put in, you know. So you get one of these, they're called a step down converter or a buck converter, and then it's kind of a pain so to do this, the soldering part, but you really don't want to deal with this stupid little adjustment. You want a nice adjustment you can get your fingers on. And I always use solid core wire. I don't like messing with that stranded wire for little stuff, so it's a lot easier to do it that way. But yeah, and then you got this nice little box, and once I put the cover on, it'll be nice and clean and all that. And then you got plenty of power here to run other stuff, you know. If you just got one of these old cheap computer power supplies, so I got it running some computer fans to keep my stepper drivers cool. But I mean, and there's I don't remember how it all works, but there's a 5-volt supply in one of these colors, and there's even I think there's -12 and -5 also, but there's a bunch of different voltages. But the yellow is 12 volts, and the black is ground, and the green is the on-off switch that turns on when it's grounded. So hope this gives you some ideas on cheap ways to do flood cooling, because it's not that big of a deal, you know, as long as you can build a catch basin. And then I just used Cool Mist, the mist coolant, jug of mist coolant, and I use that as flood coolant because I initially had a mist cooler, so I still got all that. So, and it works fine as a flood coolant, so that'll help you keep your bits cool and keep your chips out of the way. All right, later.